Welcome to my channel. Subscribe to the channel and listen to my stories every day. Leah and I had been married for 8 years. We weren't perfect, but who is? We'd built a comfortable life together, a quaint suburban home, careers that didn't make us rich but kept the bills paid, and the quiet satisfaction of companionship. To the outside world, we had everything. But lately, cracks had begun to show. It started small: missed dinners, a decline in her laughter, and a new fixation on her appearance. Leah had always been naturally beautiful, the kind of woman who could roll out of bed and make the sunrise feel redundant. But now, her gym bag had become a fixture by the door. Her phone never left her side. And then there was her sudden interest in late-night work meetings. I wanted to believe her. Trust isn't just the foundation of marriage, it's the armor you put on every day to protect the life you've built together. But there were moments when her stories didn't add up, like when she claimed to be out with colleagues, yet a glance at her Instagram showed no posts, no tags, nothing to corroborate her claims. One night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I noticed she wasn't really eating. She pushed her salad around with her fork, her mind elsewhere. "Long day?" I asked, trying to bridge the growing gap between us. She blinked, coming back to reality. "Oh, yeah. Work's been crazy lately. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. My job was predictable, almost boring: IT support for a mid-sized company. I went in, solved problems, came home. Leah worked in marketing, which seemed to mean a steady stream of cocktail hours, conferences, and networking events. Or at least, that's how she described it. "Anything I can help with?" I offered, trying to sound supportive. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No, it's fine. Just busy." After dinner, she excused herself early, saying she had emails to catch up on. I stayed at the table, staring at her half-empty plate and wondering when the easy rhythm of our lives had shifted into something strained and unfamiliar. The breaking point came a week later. We were driving to a friend's birthday party, and Leah was unusually quiet. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder, and her hand darted out to silence it before I could glance at the screen. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Just work," she replied, a little too quickly. "On a Saturday night?" She gave a nervous laugh. "Clients don't care what day it is." I let it drop, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, after the party, she fell asleep with her phone tucked under her pillow. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was imagining things or if there was something real beneath my unease. The answer came the following week. Leah left for work, forgetting her phone on the kitchen counter in her rush to get out the door. It buzzed as I was rinsing my coffee cup. Glancing at the screen, I saw a message preview: "Can't wait to see you tonight, my love." My heart stopped. The sender was simply labeled R. For a moment, I stood frozen, torn between wanting to respect her privacy and needing to know the truth. The need won. I unlocked the phone, my fingers trembling. The message thread revealed everything: dinners, stolen weekends, plans for their next rendezvous. My wife had a lover, and his name was Rick. I sat down, the phone still in my hand, as the reality of it all washed over me. The woman I had trusted, the life we had built together, it was all a lie. I wanted to call her immediately, to demand answers, but something stopped me. I needed to be smart about this. Reacting in anger wouldn't fix anything. If anything, it might give her the chance to cover her tracks. Instead, I decided to gather evidence. If Leah was betraying me, I wanted to know the full extent of it. Over the next few days, I installed a tracking app on her phone, something discreet that would log her locations without her knowledge. I also called in a favor from an old friend, a private investigator named Eric. If anyone could dig up the truth, it was him. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. When Leah came home late or gave me a quick kiss on her way out the door, I had to fight the urge to confront her. I told myself it was for the best, that knowing the whole story would give me clarity. But the waiting ate away at me. Every glance at her face, every laugh, every casual touch, it all felt like a performance, a cruel imitation of the love we once shared. One night, as I sat in my car outside Eric's office, he handed me an envelope. Inside was the proof I needed, photos of Leah and Rick at a hotel, timestamps that matched the locations logged by the tracking app. It wasn't just dinner or drinks. They were lovers. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice hollow. From what I've gathered, a few months, Eric replied. But it's serious. They're not just fooling around. I nodded, too numb to respond. Eric hesitated before speaking again. Mark, I know this is a lot to take in. But whatever you decide to do, don't rush. Take time to think it through. I thanked him and left, the envelope clutched in my hands like a bomb waiting to go off. As I drove home, my mind churned with possibilities. I could confront Leah, demand an explanation, or even file for divorce. But none of those options felt satisfying. I didn't just want answers. I wanted justice. When I pulled into the driveway that night, Leah was already in bed. I stood in the doorway of our room, watching her sleep, and made a silent promise to myself, she would feel the weight of her choices. But first, I needed to plan. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about reclaiming my dignity, one step at a time. After uncovering Leah's betrayal, life became a strange balancing act. Every day I played the part of the unsuspecting husband, smiling when necessary, laughing when expected, and pretending the walls of my world weren't crumbling around me. Each interaction with her felt like an elaborate charade. But beneath the surface, I was gathering strength, and information. The tracking app continued to log Leah's every move, and the private investigator, Eric, kept delivering new pieces of the puzzle. Leah and Rick weren't careful. They weren't even subtle. Texts, locations, receipts, it was all laid bare in black and white. Every dinner date and weekend getaway was another knife in my back, yet I refused to let the pain cloud my judgment. This wasn't just about anger. It was about preparation. Eric handed me his latest findings over coffee one chilly Tuesday morning. He had a look of reluctant pity, the kind people wear when delivering bad news. Mark, I've got the full report, he said, sliding a manila folder across the table. It's worse than I thought. I opened the folder, scanning through its contents. Photos of Leah and Rick in a cozy cafe, her hand resting on his as they smiled at each other. A receipt for a hotel in the city, where they'd spent the weekend while I thought she was visiting her sister. Copies of their text messages, explicit, intimate, and damning. Christ, I muttered under my breath, closing the folder. They didn't even bother trying to hide it. Eric nodded, his expression grim. They're reckless. That works in your favor, though. The more evidence we collect, the stronger your case. My case, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. A divorce. That was the obvious answer, wasn't it? End it cleanly, take my half of the life we'd built, and walk away. But as I stared at the photos, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about ending things. It was about making Leah understand the depth of her betrayal. She needed to know what it felt like to have the rug pulled out from under her. Thanks, Eric, I said, standing to leave. Keep digging. I'm not done yet. At home, Leah was her usual self, charming, poised, and utterly two-faced. She came home late that evening, her cheeks flushed with the cold and something else I didn't want to name. Long day? I asked casually, setting down my coffee mug as she walked into the kitchen. Exhausting, she sighed, dropping her bag on the counter. That new client is driving me insane. We had to go over the campaign strategy 3 times before he finally agreed to it. I smiled, hiding the disgust that churned in my stomach. Sounds rough. She leaned over to kiss me, and I let her. Her lips felt cold and unfamiliar, like a stranger's. I'm going to shower, she said, grabbing her phone and heading upstairs. As soon as she disappeared, I opened my laptop. The tracking app showed her last location, a boutique hotel downtown. The timestamps matched Eric's report. It was as if she didn't care about being caught. Or worse, she assumed I was too blind to see what was happening right in front of me. That night, as she slept beside me, I scrolled through the evidence on my laptop. The photos, the receipts, the texts, it was all there, a mountain of proof that made my stomach turn. But amidst the hurt, a plan was beginning to take shape. This wouldn't just be a confrontation. It would be a reckoning. Over the next few days, I began laying the groundwork. First, I contacted our lawyer, Laura, under the pretense of updating our wills. She had been a trusted family attorney for years, and I knew she would handle my situation with care. Mark, she said during our meeting, her tone cautious, this isn't just about updating your will, is it? I shook my head, sliding the folder across her desk. I need your advice. She opened the folder, her sharp eyes scanning its contents. When she looked up, there was a flicker of anger in her expression. I'm sorry you're going through this. Have you decided what you want to do? Not yet, I admitted. I'm not rushing into anything. But I want to be prepared. If I decide to file for divorce, I want to know my options. Laura nodded. You're doing the right thing by planning ahead. With this evidence, you'll have a strong case. But I'll be honest, divorces can get messy, especially when infidelity is involved. Are you ready for that? I wasn't sure how to answer. Was anyone ever ready for something like this? But I knew one thing, I wasn't going to let Leah walk away unscathed. The next step was more difficult. Our joint accounts were intertwined, a tangled web of shared finances and mutual obligations. Quietly, I began untangling them. I transferred half of our savings into a separate account under my name, a precaution, not an act of spite. If Leah could betray me so easily, I had no doubt she would try to take everything she could when the time came. I also started cataloging our assets, the house, the cars, even the furniture. It felt cold and calculating, but necessary. Every step I took was another layer of protection, a shield against the storm I knew was coming. Meanwhile, I continued to play the role of the oblivious husband. Leah's lies rolled off her tongue with practiced ease, each one a reminder of the woman I thought I knew and the stranger she had become. One evening, as we sat in the living room watching TV, she received a text. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, and I glanced at it before she could pick it up. The name R flashed on the screen, along with a message, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Love you." My heart pounded, but I kept my face neutral. Leah quickly grabbed the phone, typing out a reply before setting it down again. She glanced at me, her smile forced. Work stuff. I nodded, my own smile just as hollow. Must be an important client. She laughed, the sound grating in my ears. You have no idea. As she turned back to the TV, I stared at her profile, memorizing every detail, the curve of her cheek, the way her hair fell over her shoulder. I had loved this woman once, fiercely and completely. Now, I wasn't sure what I felt. Love? Hate? Or something worse, a void where my feelings used to be. But one thing was clear, the life we had built was over. And when the time came, I would make sure Leah understood exactly why. The days stretched on, each one heavier than the last. Leah and I existed like strangers under the same roof, playing roles in a script that neither of us believed in anymore. She would kiss me goodbye each morning and return late at night, her excuses as rehearsed as her smiles. I kept my distance, focused on perfecting my plan. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday evening. Leah had texted earlier to say she would be late again, work dinner, she claimed. It was the same lie she always told, but this time, I was ready to act. I drove to the restaurant where her tracking app indicated she was. The place was a high-end spot, the kind of place we used to go on anniversaries. I parked across the street, rain streaking down the windshield, and watched through the large front windows. There she was, sitting with Rick at a table in the corner. They leaned toward each other, their heads close, laughing over a shared bottle of wine. Leah's hand rested on his arm, her face alight with a warmth she hadn't shown me in months. It was a gut punch, seeing her like that. But more than hurt, I felt resolve. I snapped a few photos with my phone, making sure to capture every damning detail. When they finally left, hand in hand, I followed them from a distance. They walked to a nearby hotel, laughing as they disappeared inside. That was all the confirmation I needed. The next morning, Leah came home as if nothing had happened. She greeted me with a cheerful, "Good morning," and kissed my cheek before heading to the shower. I watched her go, marveling at the audacity of it all. When she left for work, I began setting my plan in motion. First, I called Laura. "It's time," I said, my voice steady. Laura didn't ask for details. She simply nodded on the other end of the line. "Understood. I'll start drafting the paperwork. Do you want to serve her at home or work?" "Work," I replied without hesitation. She deserves the public humiliation. Next, I called Eric. "I need one more thing from you," I said. "Find out everything you can about Rick. His job, his family, his entire life." Eric was efficient as always. Within 24 hours, I had a dossier on Rick. He was married, of course he was. His wife, Angela, was a pediatric nurse, and they had 2 young children. The perfect family, at least on the surface. I felt a pang of guilt for what I was about to do, but it passed quickly. Rick had no qualms about wrecking my marriage. He deserved what was coming. The confrontation came on a Saturday evening. I had been planning it for days, rehearsing every word in my mind. Leah came home around 6, her expression wary when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table. "Mark," she said cautiously. "Is everything okay?" "Have a seat," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. She hesitated but sat down. "What's going on?" I slid a manila envelope across the table. She frowned as she opened it, her face paling as she sifted through the contents. Photos of her and Rick, receipts from their hotel stays, printouts of their text messages. Everything was there, laid out in cold, hard evidence. "I know," I said simply. Leah's mouth opened and closed, her words failing her. Finally, she managed, "Mark, this isn't what it looks like." "Don't insult me," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "You've been lying to me for months, maybe longer. Do you really think I'm that stupid?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you. Didn't you?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You didn't think about me at all, Leah. Or our marriage. Or the life we built together." She started to cry, her sobs loud and unrestrained. "I made a mistake. I was lonely, Mark. You've been so distant, so focused on work. I didn't know how to reach you." "Don't you dare blame this on me," I said, my voice low and cold. "I worked hard for us, for this life. I trusted you. And you threw it all away for what? For him." Leah shook her head, but she didn't deny it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Please, let me fix this. I'll do anything." "It's too late for that," I replied. "I've already filed for divorce. You'll be served on Monday." Her face crumpled, the weight of my words sinking in. "Mark, no. Please. We can work through this." "There's nothing to work through," I said, standing up. You made your choice, Leah. Now you'll have to live with it. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I drafted an email to Angela, Rick's wife. I attached some of the photos and text messages, along with a simple note. Angela, I thought you deserved to know the truth. Your husband and my wife have been having an affair for months. If you'd like to talk, I'm happy to share more details. I'm sorry you're going through this, but I couldn't let you stay in the dark. I hesitated before hitting send, wondering if I was crossing a line. But then I thought of Leah and Rick, their laughter at the restaurant, their easy smiles. They didn't care about the lines they crossed. Why should I? With a deep breath, I pressed send. The fallout was swift and brutal. Angela called me the next day, her voice shaking as she confirmed the details. She thanked me for telling her, though her pain was palpable. Rick was furious, of course. He called Leah, who in turn screamed at me for ruining everything. You ruined it, I told her calmly. I just finished what you started. By the end of the week, Leah had moved out, her belongings packed into boxes and stacked in the garage. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief as I watched her drive away for the last time. The life we had shared was over, but for the first time in months, I felt free. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to walk. And I would walk it without her. The weeks following Leah's departure were a whirlwind of paperwork, awkward explanations to friends, and the empty silence of a house that once echoed with shared laughter. I thought I'd made peace with it all. Leah was gone, and I was slowly reclaiming my life. But the final twist was still to come, one that would unravel everything I thought I knew. It began with a simple knock at my door. I opened it to find Angela standing there. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with dark circles. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days, and her hands trembled as she clutched a manila envelope. "Mark," she said, her voice shaky. "Can I come in?" "Of course," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd confronted Leah weeks earlier. Angela set the envelope on the table but didn't open it right away. Instead, she looked at me with a strange mix of pity and urgency. "I've been doing some digging," she said finally. "After you sent me that email, I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. I hired a private investigator to look into Rick." I nodded, unsure where this was going. "And?" Angela hesitated, then pushed the envelope toward me. "You need to see this." I opened it, pulling out a stack of photos and documents. At first, they seemed mundane, images of Rick at various places, receipts, schedules. But then one photo caught my eye, Rick standing in front of a bank, shaking hands with someone who looked eerily familiar. I squinted at the picture, trying to place the face. It hit me like a freight train. The man in the photo was Eric, my private investigator. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice rising. Angela leaned forward, her expression grim. "Rick and Eric know each other. They've worked together before. I found records of them colluding on other cases, divorces, mostly. They create situations to push couples apart and cash in on the fallout. Eric gathers evidence, Rick seduces the spouse, and they split the profits from whatever settlements or assets they can manipulate." I stared at her, the room spinning around me. "You're saying this was planned? That they targeted Leah and me?" Angela nodded. "I think so. I don't know how they chose you, but it's clear they've done this before. Rick has a pattern, he goes after women who seem vulnerable, women who might be open to attention they're not getting at home." The air felt thick, suffocating. I thought back to Leah's behavior over the past months, the sudden shift in her demeanor, the way Rick had seemed to appear out of nowhere. Had it all been orchestrated? "This can't be real," I muttered, shaking my head. "Leah wouldn't, she couldn't." Angela reached out, placing a hand on mine. "Mark, I don't think Leah was innocent, but I also think she was manipulated. Rick is a predator. He knows exactly what to say and do to get what he wants. I sat back, the weight of it all crashing down on me. If Angela was right, then everything I'd done, the confrontation, the divorce, the fallout, had been based on a lie. Or at least, a carefully constructed truth. What do we do? I asked finally. Angela straightened, her jaw set with determination. We expose them. Together. Rick and Eric need to pay for what they've done. Over the next few weeks, Angela and I worked tirelessly. She contacted her investigator, who provided more evidence of Rick and Eric's scheme. We gathered records, testimonies, even statements from other victims who had been targeted by the duo. Each piece of the puzzle painted a darker picture of their deception. The hardest part was confronting Leah. Despite everything, I needed to know how much she knew. When I called her, she sounded wary but agreed to meet. We sat in a small cafe, the air between us heavy with unspoken tension. What do you want, Mark? She asked, her tone defensive. I need to know the truth, I said, sliding a photo of Rick and Eric across the table. Did you know they were working together? Her face went pale as she stared at the image. I don't understand. What is this? It's proof that Rick wasn't who you thought he was, I said, my voice steady. He and Eric orchestrated this entire thing. He targeted you, Leah. He manipulated you into betraying me. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the tears of someone caught in a lie. They were tears of realization, of regret. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear, Mark, I didn't know. Rick made me feel, he made me believe. I cut her off, unable to bear the sound of her excuses. You let him destroy us, Leah. Whether you knew or not, you let it happen. She sobbed quietly, and for a brief moment, I felt a pang of pity. But it was fleeting. My focus was on bringing Rick and Eric to justice. In the end, Angela and I succeeded. With the evidence we gathered, we were able to take Rick and Eric to court. They faced charges for fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. Their scheme unraveled, and their reputations were left in ruins. As for Leah, she tried to make amends, but the damage was done. I couldn't forgive her, not fully. We finalized the divorce, and I moved on, determined to rebuild my life. Angela and I stayed in touch, bound by the strange twist of fate that had brought us together. We weren't exactly friends, but there was a quiet understanding between us, a shared resilience in the face of betrayal. Life moved forward, as it always does. But I carried the scars of what happened, a constant reminder of how easily trust can be shattered. Still, I found solace in knowing that I had reclaimed my dignity, that I had fought back against the darkness and emerged stronger. And as I stood on the other side of it all, I realized something important: betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise from it does.